Here we go, another edition of Sports Medicine Weekly. Happy Saturday morning to everybody. I'm Steve Kashul, Chicago Bulls radio host. So happy to be joined once again this week by Dr. Charles Bush-Joseph. Dr. Chuck is a sports medicine specialist, orthopedic surgeon with Midwest Orthopaedics at Rush. Former head team physician for the Chicago White Sox, 14 years as their head team physician, still works the White Sox and also the Chicago Bulls, along with the fine doctors at Midwest Orthopaedics at Rush. Subbing this week once again for Dr. Brian Cole. Our website is sportsmedicineweekly.com. Dr. Chuck, thanks for joining us again this week. How's everything?
Thanks for the opportunity. I love being here. I'm a longtime listener and always enjoy my opportunity to be a host with you.
I appreciate it. You know, I mentioned 14 years with the Chicago White Sox. You were there for the World Series year. Last week you told us a great story about Paul Konerko and how you had to stretch him out before every game, and the least limber guy. I feel like that myself half the time I get out of bed. That was a great story. Your favorite memories of White Sox and Bulls throughout the years, of all the years that you've been working with these guys, what stands out with you?
You know, I think like a lot of players, the pleasure that maybe that Dr. Cole and I have of spending long time with professional athletes, what they find and what I find is that the relationships in the locker room was almost more important than sometimes the games, and certainly the wins and losses. You know, I would say the memories I'll take to my grave is my relationship with Jim Thome. Jim Thome, I think the public perception is that he's a great guy. I would tell you that it's false. He's the greatest guy.
That's what everyone says,
he's the nicest guy in the world, and he treated everybody around him with the same level of respect, whether you were a secretary with the organization or a ticket taker or you were Jerry Reinsdorf. He treated everybody and continues to do so with respect. Now, one thing that Jim did have a tendency to, he liked to swing the bat. And he likes to take too many swings. And like a big, well-muscled guy like Jim, he occasionally swung himself into a tizzy. And so probably every 6 months or so, Jim would, after 300 swings in the cage, would get his back locked up and would walk into the training room, and me and Herm Snyder would look at him, and he'd be crooked. He would have almost a 20-degree tilt between his shoulders and his hip.
Really?
And so we would have to shut him down for a while, and he would get aggressive spine treatment. We'd put him on steroids and lots of rehab and massage and modalities. And we actually had to put him on a swing count. You hear about our
pitch counts. Now you got swing counts.
We had pitch counts and we had minutes counts for the Bulls. We had to keep Jim on a swing count, and we had to keep him under 200 swings because he was such a scientific hitter. And he was so detailed in his preparation, he would just spend hours in the cage. And, we finally got him slowed down a little bit. And later in his career, these back episodes became less and less frequent. But certainly one of my memories that I'll take ever is Jim walking into the training room almost like a puzzle. Something looking like a cartoon character with his shoulders way offset from his spine. So we love Jim for that one.
Well, let me clarify something. You mentioned steroids. People get freaked out when they hear the word steroids. You said we had to give Jim a couple of steroids. What does that mean?
I apologize for that, and I certainly don't want to get our listeners upset. There's two types of steroids. Catabolic steroids, which is we normally use for patients who have back injuries or bad allergies or nerve injuries, we use very commonly. Anabolic steroids, which is read in the newspaper and all the steroid in the hearings with Major League Baseball, totally different type of steroids. So, no, we're not allowed. We don't prescribe anabolic steroids. We don't use them.
Obviously.
The catabolic steroids like prednisone and Medrol dose packs, we do have to use them. We use them on our regular patients, our recreational, our occupational injuries, and we use them on our professional athletes. They're very safe when used properly. So
wow.
I would want to reassure our patients they have good value. And yeah, if you have severe back spasm or you're having a severe allergic reaction, that's one of the first things that many of your physicians will prescribe you for.
Were you there with the A.J. Przinsky, Michael Barrett, Cubs, White Sox fight?
I was.
Battles of two catchers?
That was the two catchers, and, A.J.'s another one. A.J., for all the scrapes that he found himself in, really was only on the DL once during his entire White Sox career, and even after the fight. And I can't tell you how many collisions he endured at home plate. No, A.J. was a tough guy, and he was a little bit maybe a Dennis Rodman or Bill Lambier. You love him on your team, you hate him when he's the opposition. Smart man, very intelligent, played to the weakness of the opponent, took every advantage possible. You know, he didn't have the greatest physical talents of what you say a Pudge Rodriguez or Johnny Bench or Carlton Fisk, but he made use of every single tool. And that's why I tell you, for all of us, all recreational weekend warriors, there's people that have talent. A lot of people have talent. Then there's people who have heart. A lot of people have heart, but people have heart, talent, and a head for the game. Those are the ones that get to the highest level. And that's where you find A.J. Brzezinski, Jim Thome, Paul Konerko, Mark Burley. Mark Burley couldn't break a pane of glass sometimes, but could still get players out. You know, when you see the most recent World Series where guys are throwing 92 to 101. Joe Kelly from the Red Sox, he was averaging 99. Mark Burley, late in the season, he was hitting 83, 84 on his fastball. But he was such a wily pitcher. He had such experience, knew how to manage the player, the weaknesses of the batter, that he can get players out that with velocities that we would look at today and we would just laugh at. How could he be a pitcher? But Mark Burley was one of the best pitchers in White Sox history and led us to a World Series.
Kind of like Greg Maddux, right? Never had the great speed, but he knew how to pitch.
It's the science of pitching as opposed to the art or as opposed to the physicality of throwing. Most throwers come up as throwers, and the ones who have that Greg Maddux career, that John Smoltz career, they suffer an injury or two. They come back and they become pitchers. And the pitchers is how you get into that 10, 12, 14-year career, where the throwers may survive for a while, they may be effective, but as soon as they injure themselves, they lose a little velocity, they're in trouble. And as we talked about before, 1 out of 3, 1 out of 4 major league pitchers is going to have Tommy John surgery. And so if you're going to pitch long enough, you're going to lose your arm. And so we worry now about our younger athletes throwing too much in their teen years, in their developmental years. We say that they almost got a pitch clock on their elbow. And how hard do you throw those pitches and when? The old theory, Steve, and you and I have had these conversations over the years, was that, if you let your youngster throwing curveballs at too young of an age, they're going to throw out their elbow. Well, our newer research is telling us that's not necessarily true. It's not so much the curveball or the slider. It's just the pure velocity and the amount. So it's the velocity and intensity of the pitching as opposed to a particular pitch. So, I was on this show with you many years ago, and we said, have your kids throw fastballs and changeups. We're now actually thinking a little bit more, you got to be careful how many fastballs they throw. And certainly we keep an eye on that in our high school and our collegiate pitchers. The state of Illinois has now passed a bill that's certainly in the regulation phase right now, that's going to hold some responsibility on coaches to how many pitches a high school pitcher can throw. Now, the high school coaches are squawking about that because they're saying, well, I have some control over how much they're throwing on the school team, but I have no control how much they're throwing in their club team or their showcase or their traveling team. So my message to parents is you have to think of your son's elbow and shoulder, just like you think of their knee, as assets to your child, and they have to be protected and nurtured.
Again, you're listening to Sports Medicine Weekly here on Saturday morning. So thrilled to be with Dr. Charles Bush-Joseph from Midwest Orthopaedics at Rush, former head team physician with the Chicago White Sox. He's told us some stories about the White Sox, and he still is a White Sox team physician, also with the Chicago Bulls. So, all right, I've got one that hits home for me, okay? So I've got a 14-year-old and 11-year-old. My 14-year-old pitched a lot of innings last summer with his travel team. He hasn't pitched, Doc, since probably end of July, and he hasn't pitched since. All right, here we are in mid-November, and I'm wondering, I'm saying, Corey, should we – I don't know. I want to get your advice right here. Hopefully you'll help some other parents listening as well. Do we want to start throwing? He plays hockey, so we don't have a lot of time to throw. We really don't want to go outdoors anymore. Is he okay not throwing at all till January, February when they start ramping up the baseball workouts? Or should I have him throw it all now before the first of the year?
Steve, I'm going to talk to our producer, Eli. I'm going to give you the gold star. You're a gold star parent. So the important thing is that your son gets an appropriate period of rest. And for us, that 3-month time frame. If they get 3 months of rest, then it's safe for them to start to ramp it back up. And so, what we do with our professional athletes, Steve, they shut down, and unfortunately for the Sox, end of September, for the Cubs, end of October. And then usually we're not letting them pick up a ball until late December, probably early January, starting to throw. And then we like that 6 to 8 week ramp up period before their season, so they've got adequate arm strength. So we actually say work backwards. When is your son got to try out for the high school team? Maybe it's early February.
Yeah.
So probably about that 6 week time frame before that he should be starting a graduated throwing program. Sure, short toss, low intensity throw, and then gradually stretching out, long toss, then long toss on a line. And then even if he's a pitcher, we say then eventually flat ground pitching. So, work backwards from when he's going to have to be competitive as opposed to that time frame off. But in general, 3 months off is the rule. And we like that. You're getting a gold star.
And final question on that. When he has a little bit of soreness, you expect that when he first starts throwing again?
Yeah, ramp up pain
out?
In the muscle, very normal, very common. And we would differentiate post-throwing soreness from delivery pain. If your son or your daughter is having pain on the motion of throwing, they get to that load up position, their elbows up, their hands up back and high, and they're starting to come through and they're having pain on that acceleration phase, that's a problem. We put the brakes on. Yeah, I've had my bullpen. I've thrown 25, 30 pitches, played catch with dad and out in the backyard in the cold, and I'm a little stiff afterwards. That's not bad. I would expect that.
Ice after a workout like that, or it's okay?
We always say warm up, stretch out, work out, ice down. So
around the yard.
To use some of the Tiger Balm or some of the rubs or BioFreeze before and after, I think that stuff's effective.
Great stuff. Dr. Charles Bush Joseph. We're just getting started here. Great stuff from our co-host today, subbing for Dr. Brian Cole. I'm Steve Kashul. When we come back, more Sports Medicine Weekly. Still to come on the show, our Ask the Doctor segment. Always a staple to show some great questions this week for Dr. Chuck. So stay with us at Sports Medicine Weekly, only on 670 The Score.